An emotional and inspiring story of overcoming hardship, deeply moving. The cry of "she's lying" echoes from a small and innocent girl, and the pure truth in her voice has the power to open the eyes of a millionaire. If you enjoy emotional stories, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're listening from. Continuing. Marcus Thompson's mansion stood imposingly in the Hampstead neighbourhood of London, a monument to the prosperity he had built over decades. Those white walls, the meticulously manicured gardens, the infinity pool reflecting the London sky, everything there breathed success. But inside, in those wide, silent corridors, time seemed to have stopped in a cruel way, imprisoning not only the space, but also the man who had once commanded business empires with a firm hand and keen vision. Marcus was 52 years old when the accident happened. A business trip to the countryside, a wet road, an out-of-control truck. The impact was violent enough to take away the movement in his legs, but not his consciousness. The doctors explained with that professional and distant tone that spinal cord injuries were unpredictable, that recovery would depend on many factors, that perhaps with time, with intensive physical therapy, with luck, perhaps, the word that became the cruelest in his vocabulary. In the first months after the accident, Marcus fought. He fought against the pain, against the frustration, against the rage that boiled within him every time he looked at his own inert legs. But gradually, as the months turned into a year, then two, hope dissolved like salt in water. The wheelchair ceased to be temporary and became his permanent reality. And with it came resignation. That heavy feeling that the life he had known had ended on that wet road. The fortune he had accumulated over the years now served to pay a team of professionals who cared for him with mechanical efficiency. Nurses who came in the morning for basic care, physical therapists who conducted monotonous exercise sessions that seemed to lead nowhere, masseurs who worked muscles he could barely feel. All were generously paid, all did their job competently, but none of them looked at him as a man, only as a patient, a body to be maintained. And then there was Vivian. Vivian Hayes had entered Marcus's life 6 months after the accident, introduced by a distant cousin as someone who could help him in that difficult time. She was 38, with brown hair always impeccably styled, green eyes that seemed to convey infinite tenderness, and a smile that disarmed any defense. In their first meetings, she was just kind, offering companionship, talking about pleasantries, bringing flowers to brighten the mansion's somber rooms. But Vivian knew exactly what she was doing. With calculated patience, she gradually made herself indispensable. She began coordinating the healthcare professionals' schedules, choosing menus, organizing the household routine. When Marcus expressed gratitude, she modestly averted her gaze with rehearsed humility and said she did everything out of affection, that she couldn't bear to see him that way, that he deserved to have someone by his side who truly cared. 6 months after meeting her, Marcus asked Vivian to marry him. She feigned surprise, let tears stream down her face, and accepted with a prolonged embrace. Since then, a ritual had been established in the mansion. Every day, without exception, at 6 in the evening, Vivian served Marcus a glass of Burgundy wine. She made a point of bringing the glass personally, never delegating this task to the staff. She approached with that soft smile, leaned slightly so that the floral perfume she wore enveloped the room, and handed the glass to him with almost ceremonial delicacy. "Look at me, my love," she would say in a velvety voice, lightly touching his face. "You need to relax. The wine will do you good. Doctors always say a little red wine is healthy for the heart, don't they? And I know how tense you get with all those physical therapy sessions. Drink slowly, enjoy the moment. I'm here with you." Marcus drank, every afternoon without questioning. The dark liquid went down his throat with a slightly bitter taste that he attributed to the quality of the vintage, and soon after came a pleasant numbness. Worries dissipated, muscles relaxed, and he felt as if the world around him became less heavy, less real. Vivian stayed there, watching him carefully until the glass was empty, then smiled contentedly, took the glass and left, leaving him in that comfortable haze until bedtime. Autumn had arrived in London, bringing those grey and rainy afternoons so characteristic of the city. It was precisely on one of these afternoons, when the rain drummed on the mansion's window panes and the sky seemed to descend upon the rooftops, that Marcus's routine began to be subtly disturbed. Mrs. Nellie, the cleaner who had worked in the house for years, had to be absent for health reasons. Vivian, always efficient, immediately hired a temporary replacement. The new employee was named Rachel, a simple woman in her 40s, with calloused hands and a tired look of someone who knew the weight of life well. She arrived on a Monday morning, bringing with her a girl of about 8 years old. "I'm sorry to show up with my daughter, madam," Rachel said in a hesitant voice when she met Vivian at the service entrance. "I had no one to leave her with today. The school sent her home because of a plumbing problem, and the neighbor who usually looks after her when I work is away. I promise she won't be a bother. She'll stay quiet, you won't even notice she's here." Vivian frowned slightly, but maintained her polite smile. "All right, Rachel. But just for today, make it clear to her that she cannot touch anything, cannot make noise, and especially cannot bother Mr. Thompson. He needs absolute tranquility." "Understood?" "Yes, madam." "Don't worry. Marina is well behaved." "Marina!" The girl had dark hair tied in a ponytail, huge and curious brown eyes, and that contained energy typical of children who learn early not to take up too much space. She wore a simple cotton dress, worn sneakers, and carried a faded pink backpack on her back. Upon entering the mansion, her eyes widened. For her, accustomed to the cramped two-room apartment where she lived with her mother in the East End, that house was a castle out of a fairy tale. While Rachel began her work in the laundry room, Marina timidly explored the permitted spaces. She walked slowly through the wide corridors, observed the paintings on the walls, peered into rooms through half-open doors. It was thus, wandering with that silent curiosity, that she reached the spacious living room where Marcus spent most of his days. The room had high ceilings, large windows overlooking the garden, leather armchairs, a bookcase filled with books no one touched anymore, and a grand piano that hadn't been played in years. In the center, near the window, was Marcus in his wheelchair, covered by a light blanket, looking at the garden without really seeing anything. Marina stopped at the door, observing the man in silence. Marcus noticed her presence and turned his head. "Hello," he said in a neutral voice. "You must be the new cleaner's daughter." Marina nodded, still not fully entering the room. "Sorry to bother you, sir. My mom said I shouldn't make noise." "It's all right. You can stay there if you want." "What's your name?" "Farita. Nice to meet you, Marina. I'm Marcus." The girl took a few steps into the room, but maintained a respectful distance. She didn't quite know what to say, so she just stood there, alternating her gaze between the man and the garden outside. Marcus turned his attention back to the window, and for a few minutes only the sound of the rain filled the silence between them. That afternoon, like all the others at 6 o'clock sharp, Vivian appeared carrying the silver tray with the glass of wine. She paused when she noticed the girl in the room, and her smile became slightly more tense. "Marina, isn't it? Your mother shouldn't let you bother Mr. Thompson here." "She's not bothering me," Marcus said with automatic kindness. "She was just keeping me company." Vivian approached with the glass, but her eyes lingered on the girl for an extra moment. "Even so, dear, it would be better if you went to the kitchen. Help your mother, all right? Adults need moments of privacy." Marina nodded and began to withdraw, but something made her hesitate. She watched Vivian lean over Marcus, hand him the glass with that studied gesture, whisper sweet words. And it was at that moment, when Vivian briefly turned her back to adjust the blanket over Marcus's legs, that Marina saw. It was quick, almost imperceptible. Vivian reached into her dress pocket, took out something small, and with a discreet movement, poured a fine powder into the glass before handing it to Marcus. The gesture was so natural, so fluid, that someone less attentive would never have noticed. But Marina, standing near the door, saw everything with crystal clarity. The girl felt her heart race. She knew there was something wrong with it, even without understanding exactly what. Her childlike instinct, not yet corrupted by the justifications and rationalizations of the adult world, screamed inside her that it wasn't right. But she was just a child, the cleaner's daughter, in a house that wasn't hers. What could she do? Marina quickly withdrew and went to look for her mother in the laundry room. She found Rachel folding sheets, her face concentrated on her work. "Mom," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." "Later, Marina." "Can't you see I'm busy?" "But Mom, it's important. That woman, the gentleman's fiancée, she put something in his wine. A powder. I saw it." Rachel stopped what she was doing and looked at her daughter with a mixture of concern and impatience. "Marina, you can't go around inventing stories." especially not about the lady of the house. That could make me lose my job, do you understand? Rich people don't like it when employees talk about their lives. But I'm not inventing it, Marina insisted, her eyes shining with frustration. I saw it, Mom, with my own eyes. She took something out of her pocket and put it in his drink before giving it to him. Enough, Marina. The girl might have seen Mrs. Hayes putting in sugar or some medicine the doctors prescribed. You're a child. You don't understand these things. Now let me work and go read a book in the kitchen. And don't go talking about this anymore, for goodness sake. Marina left the laundry room with tears of frustration in her eyes. She knew what she had seen, she knew. But no one would believe her. She was just a girl and Vivian was an adult woman, educated, whom everyone treated with respect. Who would believe a child's word against hers? In the following days, Rachel continued to come work at the mansion while Mrs. Nellie recovered. And whenever she could, whenever she wasn't seen, Marina watched. She noticed that Vivian followed the same ritual every day at 6 in the evening. Always the same tray, always the same glass, always the same rehearsed gestures. And always, when Marcus looked away or when she stood between him and anyone else, Vivian made that discreet hand movement, taking something out of her pocket and pouring it into the drink. Marina tried to approach Marcus a few times, but Vivian seemed to have a radar to detect her presence. Whenever the girl entered the room, Vivian would soon appear with some excuse to send her away. The lady of the house began to show poorly disguised irritation with the child's constant presence. It was on a rainy Thursday afternoon, when the rain fell heavily again over London, that Marina finally found an opportunity. Vivian had gone out to deal with something urgent at the bank, and Rachel was on the second floor changing the bed linen. Marina descended the stairs silently and went to the living room where Marcus was resting, his eyes half closed, lost in thought. "Mr. Thompson," she said in a low voice, approaching his wheelchair. He opened his eyes and smiled with that tired gentleness. "Hi, Marina. Does your mother know you're here?" "She's upstairs working." The girl hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "What is it?" Marina looked around to make sure they were alone. "Sir, I saw Mrs. Hayes putting something in your wine. A white powder. She does it every day when you're not looking. I swear it's true. I'm not making it up." Marcus remained motionless for a few seconds, processing the words. Then he smiled, but it was a condescending, almost paternal smile. "Marina, you're a very observant and intelligent girl. But sometimes children see things and don't quite understand what they're seeing. Vivian takes care of me. She only puts the medicines the doctors prescribed in the wine. Vitamins, supplements, things that help me. No, sir, it's not medicine." She takes it from a hidden little bag in her pocket, and she looks around before she does it, as if she doesn't want anyone to see. Marina was almost crying with frustration. "Please believe me." "She's lying." "I know she's lying." Marcus reached out and gently touched the girl's arm. "Hey, calm down. I believe you think you saw something. But Vivian is my fiancée. She's going to marry me. Why would she do something to harm me?" "I don't know, sir. But I know what I saw." Before Marcus could respond, they heard approaching footsteps. Marina quickly moved away and left the room, passing Rachel, who was coming down the stairs carrying a basket of dirty laundry. Marcus was alone again, but the girl's words echoed in his mind. "She's lying." Those two words refused to leave his head. He tried to dismiss them as childish imagination, but something in them persisted, like an invisible splinter lodged deep within his consciousness. That night, when Vivian served the wine as always, Marcus observed her movements more attentively than usual. But she was impeccable, as always. Sweet smile, gentle gestures, affectionate words. Nothing to suggest anything other than loving dedication. He drank the wine, and soon the familiar haze descended over his thoughts, softening the edges of the world, making everything less clear, less real. And before falling asleep that night, his last memory was of Marina's face, those large, insistent eyes, repeating with unwavering conviction the words he couldn't completely forget. "She's lying." Marina's words kept echoing in Marcus's mind in the following days like a persistent noise he couldn't completely silence. During the day, when he was busy with physical therapy sessions or receiving sporadic visits from his lawyer to sign company papers, he could push those thoughts away. But in moments of silence, especially at night before sleeping, the phrases returned with renewed force. "She's lying. I saw her put a strange powder in your wine. It was absurd, of course. Vivian had entered his life when he needed someone most. She had reorganized the entire household routine, cared for him with tireless dedication, taken on responsibilities no one else wanted. Why on earth would she do something to harm him? It made no sense at all. And yet, that childish voice insisted in his head, stubborn like a child who refuses to give up a truth only she sees. On Friday of that week, something unusual happened. Vivian urgently needed to travel to Edinburgh to resolve an issue related to a distant family inheritance. She was reluctant to leave him, insisted she could postpone, but Marcus assured her he would be fine. The team of professionals would be there. Rachel would continue with the cleaning, and it was only a day and a half. She eventually agreed, but before leaving in the morning, she left detailed instructions for all the staff. "Especially you, Rachel," Vivian said in a tone that tried to be friendly but carried an inflexible authority. "Mr. Thompson needs absolute tranquility. Make sure everything is impeccable, and please, keep your daughter away from the areas where he rests. Children are noisy and he needs peace." "Yes, madam," Rachel replied, lowering her eyes. Vivian left carrying 2 suitcases and that floral perfume that always accompanied her. Marcus watched her car disappear through the mansion gates and felt, to his own surprise, a strange relief. As if a weight he didn't even know he was carrying had been momentarily lifted from his shoulders. That afternoon was different. At 6 o'clock, the sacred wine hour, there was no silver tray, no glass of burgundy, no ritual. Marcus sat in his chair, watching the garden through the window, and for the first time in months he drank nothing but water. He expected to miss it, expected anxiety to come, but it didn't. Just a quiet silence. And it was that night, lying in his bed, that Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A twinge, slight, almost imperceptible, but undeniably present, in his left big toe. He remained completely still, holding his breath, trying to feel it again. And there it was. A minimal sensation, as if something within his legs was waking from a deep sleep. His heart raced. Was it imagination? A psychological effect caused by the absence of his usual routine. He concentrated all his attention on his legs, trying to move his toes. Nothing. But the sensation remained. That subtle tingling that seemed to say something inside was still alive. Marcus barely slept that night. He kept testing, trying, concentrating on his legs with an intensity he hadn't shown in years. And in the morning, when the sun began to stream through the window, he was absolutely certain it wasn't imagination. He could feel. Minimally, but he could. On Saturday, Vivian called twice to check if everything was all right. Marcus assured her it was, kept his voice casual, didn't mention anything about the sensations in his legs. Something inside him, some primitive survival instinct, whispered that he should keep it a secret, at least for now. That afternoon, at 6 o'clock, he asked one of the nurses to bring him a glass of orange juice. "No wine?" she asked, surprised. "No, today I prefer juice," he replied. And again, that night, the sensations came stronger, not just in his toes but subtly up his calves, as if tiny electrical currents were tracing forgotten paths. Sunday morning, Vivian returned. She entered through the door with that radiant smile, kissed his forehead, asked if he had missed her. Marcus smiled back and said he had, but observed her every move carefully. There was something different in how he saw her now, as if a cloudy lens had been slightly cleaned, and he was starting to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed. That afternoon, the ritual resumed. Vivian brought the glass of wine at 6 o'clock sharp, with all the usual ceremony. Marcus took the glass, thanked her with a smile, and brought it to his lips. But he didn't drink. He pretended to drink, tilted the glass enough for the liquid to touch his lips, but kept his mouth closed. When Vivian briefly turned to adjust a cushion on his chair, he quickly poured the contents of the glass into the large potted plant next to his armchair. "There, my love," he said, showing the empty glass. It was delicious as always. Vivian smiled contentedly, took the glass, and left. Marcus stayed there, his heart pounding, waiting. And that night the sensations were even more intense. He managed to move his toes slightly. It wasn't much. Anyone looking from outside might not even notice, but for him it was a miracle. It was confirmation that Marina was right. There was something in the wine. The following days were filled with terrifying discoveries and growing hopes. Marcus continued to simulate drinking the wine, discreetly pouring the liquid into the plant pot whenever Vivian was distracted. And with each passing day without that substance in his system, his body responded more. The sensations spread. Muscles began to respond to commands he sent, still weak, still uncertain, but they responded. A week later, during a physical therapy session, the professional noticed something different. "Mr. Thompson, you just contracted your thigh muscle. Was that voluntary?" Marcus hesitated. "It was a reflex, I think." The physical therapist frowned, intrigued. "That's very unusual. I'll make a note in the report. Perhaps we should do new tests." "No," Marcus said quickly, perhaps with too much emphasis. "No need. It was probably just a spasm. Let's continue with the normal routine." "But sir, that could mean—" "I said to continue the normal routine." The physical therapist backed off, confused by the reaction, but obeyed. Marcus knew he had to be careful. If Vivian suspected something was changing, if she realized the effect of her manipulation was being reversed, he didn't know what she might do. And it was then that he understood he was no longer dealing with abstract doubts or a child's words. He was dealing with something very real and very dangerous. Marina continued coming to the mansion with her mother. Mrs. Nellie had not yet fully returned to work, and Rachel had been kept as a temporary employee. The girl still tried to approach Marcus whenever she could, always with that look that seemed to carry more wisdom than her 8 years should allow. It was on a rainy Tuesday afternoon that Marina finally managed to be alone with Marcus for a few minutes. Vivian had gone out for a salon appointment, and Rachel was busy upstairs. Marina entered the room where Marcus was reading a book, or at least pretending to read, for his mind was somewhere else entirely. "Did you believe me, sir?" she asked bluntly, standing near his chair. Marcus looked at the girl and saw in her eyes a genuine concern that touched him deeply. "Yes, Marina, I believed you. You were right from the start. Is she doing something bad to you?" "She is. But now I know, and I'm going to find out what she wants. Are you going to be okay?" "I will. Thanks to you." Marina smiled, relieved, but the smile was short-lived. "My mom said it's her last day here. Mrs. Nellie comes back tomorrow. We won't be coming back." Marcus felt a pang in his chest. The only person who had tried to help him, the only one who had seen the truth, was being removed just when he most needed to keep that witness close. But he couldn't do anything at that moment without raising suspicions. "Marina," he said, holding her small hand, "you've helped me more than you can imagine. Never forget that. And if you can, keep the secret for a little longer. Don't tell anyone I know, not even your mother. Can you do that for me?" "I can," she replied seriously. "But then you'll be free of her." "I will. I promise." Marina nodded and left the room when she heard her mother's footsteps approaching. Marcus was alone again, but now with a certainty that burned in his chest. He needed to act, and he needed to act soon. It was that same night after Vivian had fallen asleep that Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. With enormous effort and pain, using his arms to support himself, he managed to transfer from the bed to the wheelchair without help. His legs still couldn't bear his weight, but the muscles responded minimally to commands. It was enough progress to fuel his determination. He picked up the cell phone he kept in the bedside table drawer and, with slightly trembling hands, typed a message to Robert Miller, his longtime lawyer and friend. "Robert, I need to speak to you urgently. Tomorrow, if possible. Come alone and don't tell anyone. It's about something serious." The reply came minutes later. "I'll be there at 10 in the morning. Are you all right?" "Tersense for now, yes, but I need help." "You can count on me." Marcus put down the phone and sat there in the dim light of the room, looking at the closed door behind which Vivian slept peacefully. How many nights had she slept like this, satisfied while slowly poisoning him? How many plans had she made while he languished in that chair, convinced he would never walk again? Rage burned in his chest, but he controlled it. Rage without strategy was useless. He needed to be cold, calculating. He needed to gather evidence before making any move. Vivian had been patient and methodical in her cruelty. He would need to be equally patient and methodical in his response. The next morning, Vivian woke up in a good mood. She personally prepared breakfast, brought it on a tray with fresh flowers in a vase, and chatted animatedly about the wedding preparations that would take place in 2 months. I chose the most beautiful venue, my love. A party house near Kensington Gardens, with wonderful gardens. It will be perfect. Small and intimate. Just the people who really matter. Marcus smiled and agreed, but inside his mind was working in another direction. 2 months. She planned to wait another 2 months before finalizing whatever she was doing. That gave him time. Not much, but enough. At 10 o'clock, Robert arrived. He was a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and the penetrating gaze of someone who had spent decades dealing with the darkest intricacies of human nature through the law. Vivian greeted him with studied politeness, offered coffee and then withdrew, saying she would leave them to discuss business matters. As soon as they were alone, Robert sat near Marcus's chair and spoke in a low voice. "What's going on?" "Your message worried me." Marcus looked at the closed door, making sure they were truly alone, and then told him everything. Marina's discovery, the sensations that returned when he stopped drinking the wine, the suspicions that grew stronger every day. Robert listened in silence, his face becoming progressively more serious. "Are you sure of what you're saying?" the lawyer asked when Marcus finished. "These are very serious accusations." "I'm sure. And I need your help to prove it." Robert was thoughtful for a few moments, his fingers drumming on the arm of the armchair. "All right, let's do this. First, you need to save samples of this wine. Every time she serves it, and you manage to pour it out without her seeing, save a little in a vial. I know a private and discreet lab that can do the analysis. Second, we need visual evidence. I'll arrange small cameras, the kind used for home security, but we'll install them in strategic places without her knowing. She'll notice if there are obvious cameras. That's why they'll be discreet. I can make it seem like they're just new security systems you decided to install out of concern for the house. And there's one more thing." He leaned closer. "If what you suspect is true, if she's really drugging you with something strong enough to simulate paralysis, then she's not doing it alone. No one has easy access to that kind of substance. I'll hire a private investigator to uncover her past, who she's been involved with if there's any pattern." Marcus nodded, feeling for the first time in a long time that he wasn't completely helpless. "How long do you think it will take?" "For the analyses, a week. For the full investigation, maybe a month. But Marcus, you have to promise me one thing. Be careful. If she suspects you know anything, we don't know what she's capable of." "I know. I'll be careful." Robert stood up, squeezed his friend's shoulder firmly, and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned one more time. "And Marcus about that girl, the one who warned you. Write down her full name and her mother's. If we need witnesses later, she could be crucial. I've already noted it down." After Robert left, Marcus was alone with his thoughts. The plan was in motion. Now it was a matter of patience, of maintaining appearances, of continuing to be the resigned and dependent man Vivian believed him to be. But inside, something had changed irreversibly. He was no longer the passive victim in a wheelchair. He was a man fighting to reclaim his life. And this time, he would not fight alone. The following 2 months were the longest and most exhausting of Marcus Thompson's life. Each day was a carefully rehearsed performance, each smile calculated, each word measured. He woke up every morning with the weight of the truth oppressing his chest. But seeing Vivian enter the room with that studied smile and breakfast on the tray, he pushed the anger into a dark corner of his soul and played the role of a loving and grateful fiancé. The hidden cameras captured everything. Day after day, they recorded Vivian approaching with the glass of wine, looking around to ensure she was alone, taking the small plastic bag from her pocket or purse, pouring the white powder into the burgundy liquid, and then serving Marcus with that expression of loving dedication. Robert collected the recordings weekly, compiling a dossier that grew increasingly robust, increasingly irrefutable. And while Vivian believed she maintained total control over the situation, Marcus grew stronger. Without the drug in his system, his body responded in ways he no longer thought possible. He could now move his legs with clear intention, contract muscles, and in moments of absolute solitude in his room, when he was sure no one was watching, he trained. He supported himself on his arms, put weight on his legs, tried to support his own frame. It was only for seconds at first. His legs trembled violently and the pain was intense, but it was possible. He was coming back. The secret, however, was kept with absolute rigor. During physical therapy sessions, Marcus continued to feign the same lack of response as always. When Vivian was nearby, he was the man resigned to the wheelchair, dependent on her care. Only in the silent hours of dawn, when the mansion slept, did he allow himself to nurture the hope that grew within him like a flame protected from the wind. Marina did not return to the mansion. Robert had discreetly spoken with Rachel, explaining that there was a delicate situation involving her employer and that it would be safer for her and her daughter to stay away temporarily. Rachel didn't ask many questions, perhaps because deep down she had always known something was wrong in that house, with that woman of studied smiles and vigilant eyes. She accepted a generous financial compensation that Robert arranged on Marcus's behalf and went to work elsewhere. Taking Marina away from that danger, she still didn't fully comprehend. Wedding preparations progressed. Vivian was radiant, more animated than Marcus had ever seen her. She talked incessantly about every detail, the flowers she had chosen, the exquisite menu, the custom-made dress, the restricted guest list that included only a few society figures and no close relatives of Marcus, something she justified by saying it would be more intimate and special that way. Of course it would, Marcus thought bitterly. Fewer witnesses, fewer people to ask uncomfortable questions later. A week before the scheduled date, Robert met with Marcus again. This time he brought with him two plainclothes police officers, Inspector Carter and Detective Taylor, both from a division specializing in financial crimes and fraud. They reviewed all the evidence, watched the recordings, examined the laboratory reports, read the documents about Vivian's past. "It's a solid case," said Inspector Carter, a middle-aged man with tired eyes that had seen a lot. "We have evidence of illegal administration of controlled substances, financial fraud, document forgery, and considering her history, we can build a case for attempted murder as well. But we need to catch her red-handed to ensure there are no legal loopholes." "What's the plan?" Marcus asked. "The ideal would be to act on the eve of the wedding," replied Detective Taylor, a young woman but with a serious and professional expression. "She'll be relaxed, confident that she's about to get what she wants. We'll have teams positioned outside the property, awaiting the signal. When you have definitive proof, something that leaves no doubt, you activate a device we'll give you and we'll enter. What if she notices? What if she suspects something?" Marcus's voice carried the accumulated tension of months. "That's why you need to keep acting perfectly until the last moment," Robert said. "I know it's been difficult. I know how much it's costing you, but it's only a few more days." Marcus nodded, though inside he felt as if he was about to explode. The rage, the betrayal, the fear of what could go wrong, all of it seethed within him in an almost uncontrollable cauldron of emotions. But he had to endure. For himself, for the men Vivian had destroyed before him, for Marina, who had the courage to tell the truth when no one else saw. The eve of the wedding arrived with a surprisingly blue sky over London, as if the entire city was oblivious to the storm that was about to break within that Hampstead mansion. Vivian woke earlier than usual, her eyes shining with an excitement Marcus now recognized as anticipated triumph. She had won again, or so she believed. Another rich, vulnerable man was about to become completely hers. During the day, the house was invaded by vendors finalizing preparations. Florists brought huge arrangements. The caterers made final adjustments to the menu. The photographer came for a technical visit to the space. Vivian coordinated everything with military efficiency, and Marcus observed that woman he once thought he loved, now seeing only the predator she had always been. In the afternoon, when the last vendors left and the house finally fell silent, Vivian approached Marcus with a gentle expression. "Tomorrow will be the happiest day of my life," she said, caressing his face. "After everything we've been through, everything we've faced, we'll finally be truly united. Forever." "Forever," Marcus repeated, forcing a smile that cost every ounce of self-control he possessed. She leaned in and kissed him, and he needed all his strength not to pull away, not to show the repulsion he felt. When she withdrew, Marcus was left alone in the living room, looking out the window at the garden where tomorrow the makeshift altar would be set up. The altar where Vivian expected to seal her victory. At 6 in the evening, as it had been religiously for all those months, Vivian appeared with the silver tray and the glass of wine. But there was something different that day. She was more radiant, more confident, and there was a gleam in her eyes that Marcus couldn't quite decipher. She approached with that smile he now saw for what it truly was, and handed him the glass. "Today is special, my love," she said in a velvety voice. "The last wine you drink as a bachelor. Tomorrow everything changes. Tomorrow we start a new life together." Marcus took the glass, his hands steady, despite the nervousness coursing through his veins. He noticed that this time Vivian didn't add anything when he was looking. She had already put the powder in before entering the room, and by the slightly cloudier color of the wine, by the generous amount in the glass, he suspected the dose was larger than usual. "The wedding day dose will be unforgettable," he remembered her words in the message, except that technically the wedding was tomorrow. But she was preparing, ensuring he would be deeply sedated before the ceremony, perhaps even unconscious enough to sign documents without truly understanding what he was doing. Marcus brought the glass to his lips, but at that exact moment, they heard an insistent knock on the front door. Vivian frowned, annoyed by the interruption. "Who could that be at this hour?" she murmured, heading to answer it. The moment she left the room, Marcus acted quickly. He poured half the contents of the glass into the potted plant next to him, as he always did, and held the rest of the liquid in the glass. When Vivian returned a few minutes later, having dispatched a delivery person with last-minute packages, Marcus still held the glass. "Why haven't you drunk it yet?" she asked, and there was a tension in her voice that hadn't been there before. "I was waiting for you to come back. I wanted you to be here." She relaxed slightly and smiled. "Then drink, my love, to us, to our future." Marcus pretended to drink once more, tilting the glass just enough for the liquid to touch his lips, but not enough to ingest a significant amount. When he lowered the glass, Vivian was watching him with her usual attention. But this time Marcus saw something more. A glint of satisfaction, almost predatory excitement. "There," he said, showing the empty glass. It still had half its real contents, but Vivian didn't notice. She was too focused on watching his face, waiting for the signs of sedation that always came. "Excellent," she said softly, taking the glass. "Now rest, my love. Tomorrow will be a long day and you need to be well." She left the room carrying the glass, and Marcus was alone. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew the cameras had captured everything. The moment she brought the already altered wine, her insistence that he drink, that look of satisfaction when she believed he had ingested the dose. But would it be enough? Robert had given him a small device, no bigger than a keychain with a red button. When pressed, it would send a signal to the teams waiting nearby. It was the signal that they had what they needed, that it was time to act. Marcus held the device in his hand, his finger hovering over the button. But something within him hesitated. Would that be enough to ensure Vivian paid for everything she had done? Would it be enough to ensure she could never do this to another person again? He thought of Henry, of Anthony, of Gus, of Robert, of all the men whose lives had been destroyed or shortened by that woman. And he thought of Marina, an 8-year-old girl who had the courage to tell the truth when all the adults around were blind. Marcus put the device in his pocket and waited. Not yet. He needed something more. Something definitive. Hours passed. Night fell over London, and the mansion plunged into silence. Vivian came to check on him before bed, satisfied to see him seemingly drowsy and confused, exactly the effect she expected from the increased dose. She stroked his hair, whispered something about how well he was resting, and retired to her own room. Marcus waited until he was sure she was asleep. Then, with painful but determined movements, he transferred himself from the chair to the floor. His legs trembled, but he forced them to respond. He supported himself on the furniture, on the walls, and inch by inch he did what he hadn't been able to do for over 2 years. He stood up. His legs barely bore his weight. His muscles screamed in protest, and he knew he wouldn't be able to stay like this for long. But he didn't need to. He just needed to get to Vivian's room. He just needed to get the final evidence he knew was there. He crossed the corridor with faltering steps, leaning on the wall with each movement. He reached her bedroom door and opened it slowly. Vivian was sleeping deeply, her face serene in the dim light. Marcus felt a wave of anger so intense that he had to close his eyes for a moment to control himself. That woman slept peacefully while planning to destroy another life. He approached the dresser where she kept her personal belongings. With trembling hands, he opened the top drawer. And there it was. a small makeup case containing several plastic bags with white powder, syringes, and a small notebook with notes. Marcus took the case and the notebook and returned to his room with the same difficulty as before. Once safely in his own space, he examined the notebook. It was a meticulous record: dates, doses, observed effects, necessary adjustments, and at the end, there were notes about the wedding: tripled dose on the eve, maintenance dose on the day, final power of attorney to sign after the ceremony, while still sedated, transfer scheduled for the following week. It was a manual on how to destroy a life, written in Vivian's neat handwriting. Marcus photographed each page with his phone and sent it to Robert. Then he took the device from his pocket and pressed the red button. In the following minutes, the mansion was invaded by police. They entered silently, efficiently, surrounding the property. Inspector Carter went directly to Vivian's room. She woke up to the lights on and an authoritative voice ordering her to get up. "What's happening?" she cried, genuinely confused. Marcus, help me." But Marcus was in the living room, now back in his chair, surrounded by investigators, and with Vivian's case and notebook on the table before him. When they brought Vivian, handcuffed, into the living room, she saw him and her face fell apart. For a moment, just for a moment, the mask completely dropped and Marcus saw what was truly behind those green eyes. Hatred. Pure hatred because she had been discovered. No remorse, no guilt, just rage at being caught. "You," she spat the words. "You knew." "How long have you known?" "Long enough," Marcus replied in a firm voice. "Long enough to gather all the evidence that you tried to destroy me, just as you destroyed others before me. You can't prove anything." "We can and we will," said Inspector Carter, showing a judicial order. "We have recordings of you tampering with his wine daily with controlled substances. We have laboratory reports confirming the presence of ace-promazine in the samples saved. We have records of fraudulent financial transfers. We have your history with other men in identical situations. And now we have your own notebook, documenting every step of your plan. It's over, Vivian. There's nowhere to run this time." She tried to say something more, but Detective Taylor led her out of the room. Marcus watched as the woman who had almost destroyed his life was led out of the mansion, still wearing her dressing gown, still with that expression of impotent fury on her face. The altar that would be set up tomorrow in the garden would remain empty. The wedding would not happen, and Vivian Hayes would finally pay for all the crimes she had committed. When the house finally quieted again, it was already dawn. Robert approached Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's over. You're free." Marcus nodded but felt no immediate relief, only a deep weariness, as if all those months of tension were finally taking their toll. "How long will she be imprisoned?" he asked. "With all the evidence we have and considering that we'll reopen previous cases based on it, she'll spend a very long time behind bars. The prosecutor has already assured me he'll ask for the maximum. And the men she did this to before? Will they know? We'll contact the families. At least they'll have the peace of knowing she's paying. And in Robert's case, the one who's still alive, maybe it will bring some comfort to know he wasn't imagining things." Marcus was silent for a moment. And then he asked the thing that mattered most to him at that moment. "The girl, Marina. Is she safe?" "She is. And when all this calms down, if you wish, we can bring her and her mother back. Not as employees, but as your guests. I think you owe her a great deal. I owe her my life." The following months were a period of recovery in every sense of the word. Marcus needed intense physical therapy to rebuild muscles atrophied not only by the original injury, but by the prolonged effects of the drug. It was painful, exhausting, and there were days when he wanted to give up. But he didn't give up. Not after fighting so hard to get to that point. Rachel and Marina returned to the mansion, but not to work. Marcus invited them to live in the house in one of the guest rooms while he recovered. Rachel insisted they didn't need charity, but Marcus explained it wasn't charity. It was gratitude. And it was also a chance not to be alone in that huge house anymore. It was Marina who accompanied him through the most difficult days of recovery. She was there when he managed to take his first real steps, still using support but standing, moving. She applauded when he crossed the entire living room without falling. And she was the one who held his hand when he finally managed to walk to the garden without any help, just with his own trembling but functional legs. "I always knew you'd be okay," "Sir," she said with that unwavering conviction of children, "because you're strong. You just needed someone to believe in you." "And you believed when no one else did," Marcus replied, kneeling to be at her height. "You saved me, Marina. Never forget that. You saved my life." She smiled, that wide, genuine smile of a child who hasn't yet learned to hide her emotions. "So we're friends now." "We are. Friends forever." Marcus never returned to being exactly who he was before the accident. Some movements remained limited. Some pains never truly left him. But he walked again. He lived again without depending on others for every aspect of his existence. And most importantly, he trusted again. Not naively, not without caution, but he came to believe that there was goodness in the world. And he found it every day in the smile of an 8-year-old girl who had the courage to say 3 simple words that changed everything. "She's lying." On a late winter afternoon, almost a year after the day Vivian was arrested, Marcus was sitting in the garden watching Marina play among the flowers. Rachel was beside him, also watching her daughter, and for the first time in a long time Marcus felt something akin to peace. "You know you don't have to stay here," he said to Rachel. "I've given you more than enough money to start over wherever you wish." "I know," Rachel replied softly, "but the truth is we like it here. Marina adores you, and I enjoy taking care of this house, not out of obligation, but because it's become our home too. If you don't mind, we'd like to stay." Marcus smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in a long time. "I would be honored if you stayed," and so they stayed. The mansion that had once been a prison of silence and manipulation was slowly transformed into a real home. There was laughter in the corridors, music in the living room, life in the gardens. Marcus gradually resumed command of his companies, working from home at first, then returning to the office for a few hours a day. He was rebuilding, not just his body or his professional life, but his capacity to believe in the future. Vivian was sentenced to 23 years in prison for multiple charges, including attempted murder, fraud, document forgery, and organized crime. Ferdinand, the doctor who supplied the drugs, was also caught and convicted. The previous cases were reopened, and although some were already beyond the statute of limitations, others resulted in additional convictions. The families of the previous victims finally had answers, and Robert, the man in Bristol who survived, sent a letter thanking Marcus for having the courage to expose her when he himself could not. On a particularly beautiful spring day, Marcus was in the garden when Marina ran up to him, her hair flying in the wind. "Uncle Marcus!" she shouted. She had started calling him uncle a few months ago, and he found he liked that title more than any other he had ever had. "Look what I found!" She opened her hands and showed a blue butterfly delicately perched on her palm. "Did you know butterflies have to get out of their cocoons by themselves? If someone tries to help them, they become weak and can't fly. But when they struggle to get out on their own, then they become strong enough to fly far away." Marcus looked at that butterfly, at the girl holding it carefully, and beyond them, at the blue London sky that stretched infinitely. And he understood the simple and profound wisdom of that metaphor. He had fought to emerge from his own cocoon. With help, yes, but the strength had come from within him. And now, finally, he was ready to fly.